Hey guys, my name is Brandon and welcome to or welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you like what you see in here, you're more than welcome to hit the subscribe button so you stay notified every time I upload a new video. Okay, let's get straight on with today's video. Hey everyone and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So I don't think I've posted on this channel or any of my channels for a long time, but I thought I'd come back, do a little comeback video. And yeah, for those of you that either do know or don't know, I'm a Celebrity. Get Me Out of Here is back on ITV, hosted by Ant and Dec, obviously in the heart of Australia. And I thought that I would do daily reviews and weekly reviews of the show to kind of give you an update as to what's going on if you're not able to watch the full show for whatever reason. So without further ado, let's get straight on. So it's quite an interesting cast. Obviously, I have watched the first week now, so I'm kind of doing my 1 week review of week 1, and I'll also do them in separate individual episodes as well. So if you prefer to watch the entire week, then you can obviously watch the weekly review, and if you prefer to watch the dailies, the daily episodes, then you can obviously watch the 7 episodes for each week. So episode 1, right at the beginning of the episode, we found out that obviously the 10 people going into I'm a Celebrity were as follows. So you had an introduction from Oti Mabuse, she's obviously the dancer and judge on Strictly Come Dancing. Talisa Kontostavlos, she's obviously a singer from N-Dubs and also X Factor judge. You had Dean McCulloch, so most people probably wouldn't necessarily know who he is unless they're in the creative world, but he's a Radio 1 DJ, so obviously he spends his time kind of behind a screen, behind a box, so you don't really get to see him. Jane Moore, so she's a loose woman and obviously a journalist. You had Danny Jones, McFly star, so obviously he's in the McFly / Busted kind of boy band. So they were the first 5 that we were introduced to. I think straight away, I mean, obviously Oti Mabuse, very funny, very strong, like individual woman, and you know, she came across really, really well. Talisa, again, looks very different to how she used to look in the past. She's obviously had her troubles in the past and her ups and downs with the music genre world and that sort of thing, but she kind of looked really good. Again, she looked like she was on a mission to kind of, you know, for people that have bad things to say about her, she kind of wanted to just kill that and be like, look, this is my real genuine self and I'm going to kind of show you who I really am. Like, forget about what people say about me or what you see in the newspapers, just take me for who I am. Obviously with Dean, the radio DJ, many people didn't really know who he was, but like I said, he came across really funny. And yeah, for an initial getting to meet him, I think obviously he has quite a strong accent as well, but yeah, he seems really funny. Obviously Jane Moore, lovely like TV presenter, she's a journalist, so she's obviously got quite a lot of interesting knowledge, and you know, she's been on TV and in that kind of world for a long time. And then Danny Jones, the McFly star, again, came across really well, looked really good, seemed quite confident, happy, like a cheeky chappy kind of guy. So yeah, they were the first 5 that we were introduced to. And Ant and Dec then entered the scene, and we found out that all 5 of them would be skydiving, and obviously when they get to the bottom there would be another 5 celebrities waiting for them on the beach, and they'd then have to pick a celebrity to team up with, and obviously then as their pairings race to the end. The winners would obviously get to stay in the leaders lodge, and they'd be exempt from having to do the first trial, so it was kind of all to play for. But before the 5 of them went anywhere, obviously this is I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, so it's not going to just be a get in the plane and go. They had their first kind of trial on land where all of them had to eat, well, they had to drink a blended drink which had bull's penis, fish eye and vomit fruit garnish. So didn't look great, it was very green, very unappetizing, and the order in which they drank the drink was the order in which they were able to skydive out of the plane. So Danny downed it first, Talisa was second, Jane was third. By default, Dean was able to go 4th because obviously Oti spat too much of the drink out, so she ended up coming 5th. And we were then introduced to the 5 other contestants or celebrities who were just obviously on the beach waiting for the rest. So you had Barry McGuigan, so boxer champion. You had GK Barry, otherwise known as Grace, so she's probably the one that the younger people are going to be able to relate to, but she's a podcaster, content creator. Alan Housel, so Coronation Street star. Melvin O'Doom, TV presenter and DJ. And finally Colleen Rooney, TV personality, aka Wayne Rooney's wife. So again, another 5 interesting characters. Obviously Barry McGuigan, boxing champion, featherweight, you know, everyone knows him in that kind of creative world, but I'm presuming he doesn't really do that anymore. But yeah, he obviously again would have a lot of stories from that kind of world. GK Barry or Grace, so again, like I said, she's a young content creator. I think she's about 21, 22, so she has her own podcast, YouTube channels. Obviously she's quite funny all over TikTok, kind of blew up throughout COVID and things, a lot of the content creators and digital creators in that world blew up. She's got a lot of creative friends. She's friends with a lot of famous people and celebrities. But yeah, I think for herself, she does stand on very strong feet. And, you know, she's recently come out as now having a girlfriend. So that was obviously quite new news. She's been on tour. So yeah, definitely one to watch, because she might seem like she's not really done much, but she has achieved quite a lot for such a young age. But yeah, it definitely will give her a bit of a platform to be able to do more things after the show. Alan from Coronation Street, again, I think his character's name is Tyrone, if I'm not mistaken. But again, he came across as a really nice, again, cheeky chappy kind of lad. Melvin, TV presenter and DJ. I think he's a Kiss. And then obviously at this point, Grace was kind of like, well, hold up, I'm a little bit outnumbered here. You've got 3 blokes and me, so need a bit of lady to come in. And obviously that's when Colleen and Rooney came in. So obviously Danny was the first one to land. He picked Barry McGuigan. They were Team Orange. Talisa picked Alan. They were Team Red. Jane obviously went with GK or Grace, because obviously they both present on Loose Women. They've just never been on the same panel, but they were in Team Green. Dean obviously only had the choice between Colleen and Melvin, but he decided to go for Colleen because he absolutely loves Colleen. And obviously, again, he deals with loads of celebrities and musicians and artists and stuff, and he was just like, I just absolutely love Colleen, so I'm going for her. And then Oti was the final one to come down. She chose Melvin. They were Team Pink. And obviously with the other 4 teams, they had like a 4x4 Range Rover, so they all got in that. And obviously with Oti and Melvin, there was no car left, so they were already out of the competition and they had to walk to camp. For the other 4 pairs, there was then a key to unlock a boat, and they basically had to, one of them was standing by the lock and one of them was having to dig for keys and this kind of putting their hands in a thing. And yeah, Talisa and Alan were the first ones that managed to find the correct key. Dean and Colleen did find a key, but they actually capsized. There was a hole in the boat, so Dean had a massive suggestion of putting like a jacket or a scarf in the hole to kind of cover the hole, and it did work temporarily. And then obviously Danny and Barry, they were able to find a key. And eventually Dean and Colleen did manage to get their boat going again, but they did capsize again. Jane and Grace, or GK, were out of the competition, so the both of them had to obviously just walk to camp. And then obviously with the final 3 couples, well actually Dean and Colleen were out as well actually, so you only had Talisa, Alan and Danny and Barry left. So yeah, they obviously had to kind of like race in their boats to this floating thing in the middle of the river, and they had to put their hand in a box, and on one side of the box was like a rope with a key, and they had to kind of just move that from one side of the box to the other. It was a box filled with green ants, and then they just had to unlock the box in order to win. Talisa and Alan won, and that meant they were exempt from the first trial. So we then found out the second trial was going to be called the Viral Volcano, and yeah, weren't really sure what that was all about, but yeah, they kind of just gave us a little heads up as to what that would be. Basically just going into some sort of volcano, obviously not being on your own, having to unlock certain stars. For the first trial, it was up to Talisa and Alan to choose which of the pairs were going to complete this trial, and it was called the Mausoleum of Misery. Mausoleum of Misery, or Mausoleum of Misery. And they just both kind of agreed that, you know, they want people that they think are going to do well at the trials or the tasks, so they chose Danny and Barry as the first pair to do the first trial. Jane got the nickname Jungle Jane the Firestarter, and yeah, she obviously kind of came to terms with the trial as being something to do with under burials, something underground. Colleen was talking about Wayne Rooney to Oti, Jane and Grace. Yeah, they were kind of aiming, I think Danny basically ended up getting the 5 out of the 10 stars, and yeah, Barry wasn't really doing very well. They basically were obviously locked underground, and each of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stars and locks had just random numbers on the floor. They had to just put the random numbers into any of the locks to try and unlock them. Danny was getting through them quite quick. They were covered with snakes, and yeah, Barry wasn't able to kind of either hear the numbers and also put the numbers in the right lock, so he was struggling, he couldn't really see. Obviously for their first meal they had kangaroo. Grace kind of just said, and kangaroo bun was her welcome to camp, and Talisa said that obviously she kind of just naturally fell into the role of camp chef. Lots of pressure, but someone has to do it, someone has to step forward, and she just kind of fell into that role. And then, yeah, for trial 2, we found out it was either going to be Dean or GK facing the trial. The public had voted for GK to do it, and she basically just said, well, what does the whole volcano part mean? Like, what does that mean? So, yeah, she wasn't really sure what she was doing. But, yeah, GK was obviously doing the first trial. today's video, I'm going to be reviewing the second episode of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here 2024. So, at the beginning of the episode, we just heard snoring from Melvin. I think it was Oti that kind of woke up to the sound of him just snoring really loudly. Danny had a cold shower. GK was talking to Colleen about having the toilet, explaining that it was very Victorian and she wasn't able to sit down. She had to kind of just squat in the hole in order to, be able to go to the toilet. Barry, Melvin, Danny, and obviously shortly joined by Alan were having their kind of like men's gym session in the morning. So obviously Barry was kind of giving them all like a bit of a workout. And then GK basically said that she felt like Lara Croft, but just a little bit paler. So obviously this is when she went to her trial on her own. So yeah, this is obviously the volcano situation. So she basically said that yeah, she wasn't really looking forward to it, but she wanted to find out more. She had to climb up this volcano, and she kind of was struggling a little bit, and she was like, well, I can't even climb up the volcano and I haven't even done the trial yet. But she did really well for someone who she hasn't really been on TV much. She's kind of just done more like social media and content and things like that. Like, you don't know how people are going to react when there's cameras around, or when they're trying to pretend that there are not cameras around, or in like trials and things with like real animals, insects. Like, you can't fake yourself on live television. Obviously I'm sure bits of it were cut out and edited in a certain way, but for these trials you see these people as genuine humans. You forget about what they've done or who they are, celebrity or not celebrity. It's a task, it's a trial. Some people have to actually face their fears. So yeah, when she went down the volcano, there were lizards in one of the holes, there were some snakes, there was a small hatch, and she basically had to kind of maneuver her way through these different little rooms. So some of the rooms she could stand up in, some of the rooms that she was able to have to kneel down on. There was one part of the room where she literally had spiders in there with her, and one of the spiders had like just sat on her helmet, but obviously she didn't know that. And there was a part where she ended up getting to like a little hatch. So she wasn't really sure what she was doing or where she was going, but she kind of was just motivating herself, just going, you know what, grow up, as if just telling herself, just get on with it, like, you got to do your best. Towards the end there was like a little water tank, so she did get into the tank, but she wasn't able to find the star under the water, so she did sabotage herself for that one. But she ended up coming out with 9 out of the 10 stars, so 10 campmates, 9 meals. That's actually not too bad. She did really well. And then again we found out that the third trial was going to be called the Sinister Sarcophagus, which again I think is something relating to being underground. Oti and Talisa were having a group chat about N-dubs, and obviously Talisa basically saying that N-dubs is like Northwest London, N-dubs, NW, and she's been in the band since she was 11, and she was kind of explaining how from 11 years old they were kind of writing their own music, they were in the studio getting inspirations and things, and for the first few years no success. And then as she was about to give up, it's actually when they broke through. So as she was about to give up on this album or song or whatever, that's when someone kind of picked it up, or that's when it went on the radio, and that's when they started bringing in views and money and the rest of it. So she went, actually, we've put a lot of hard work into it, and I'm finally glad it's paying off. Jane was obviously talking to Grace, Dean and Colleen about her royal journalism, saying that she met Princess Diana, Charles and the boys quite a lot when obviously she was younger. And obviously when they were on holiday, there were times where they were allowed to, pap, and there were times that they weren't. And I think at one point they basically said to Jane and some of the people that she was with that if they were to behave and, just give the privacy that, was needed, they would let Princess Diana and the other royals come out for like a little interview or like a little scheduled photo shoot or something like that. So yeah, giving a little bit of respect means you get a little bit of content, which was kind of what they wanted. And then the campmates were obviously draining the beans, and I think Talisa basically just said, you got to be careful when you're draining the beans because you don't want them to all fall out, and then literally 3 seconds later they all fell out. So yeah, they were draining the beans. She referred to it as #Beangate. You could see her, Dean, Jane, and I think somebody else kind of like picking the individual beans up. Obviously Dean had quite a lot of mud on the ones that he was picking up, and Talisa was like, no, you want to pick up just the beans, don't pick up the whole forest. Obviously putting it in the pot and then obviously like heating it to kind of like burn all the, bits that were unhealthy or whatever. So, yeah, that was quite funny, but obviously at the same time with roll-on beans and rice, you kind of just want to save as much as you can. Jane said that they could have like some sort of jungle church. Alan said, confess your sins. I think this is because obviously they obviously didn't have food or something like that, so they were kind of just like praying to get food. Danny was speaking about his daughter, who obviously had leukemia, so obviously it was quite difficult for him over the years to kind of deal with that and obviously understand her and what happened with that. And Talisa basically said to him that you're a man showing emotion, which is brave, because I think he got quite upset. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that as well, for those that, you know, have people or know people in their families that have had some sort of cancer or some sort of treatment or some sort of, you know, issue or disease that just kind of occurs and just appears out of nowhere. It is something difficult to face, whether the person themselves or their loved ones around them. Colleen also spoke to Dean and Oti, saying that she helped to obviously keep strong for her mum and dad when her sister Rosie was also hit with something, I think again either leukemia or cancer or something like that. And again, Dean basically said to her, look, sometimes you have to just let your emotions out. Like, yeah, you can hold them in for so long, but then if time goes and you get distracted, or if you're not thinking about anything and then all of a sudden you just get all these thoughts in your brain and you get really emotional, it's fine to have a little bit of a cry. Up next was Kev's Deals on Wheels. So Melvin and Oti, obviously they were the first losers. They lost the competition and they were the first ones to have to walk to the camp, but they were the ones to do the Meals on Wheels. So they went down to the Down Under Diner bar, and basically what they had to do in this bar, literally it was called the Down Under Bar or Down Under Diner bar, because when they walked, they obviously saw the menu, but when they walked into the kitchen, everything was upside down. So literally everything they needed to make the drinks, which would usually be on a table, was on the ceiling. So for them to make the drinks and the food, they had to open the things from the ceiling, and it was quite messy. So yeah, they had to make all these smoothies and this burger and whatever with all different sauces and sprinkles and things. They got 4 out of 4. And the question that the campmates had to answer, again, it was GK who ran to the phone. They had to answer the question of how many total followers combined do the campmates have on Instagram, TikTok, and obviously Twitter, which is now renamed as X. 10 million, 15 million, or 20 million. I think Colleen said she had about 3 million on Instagram. I think Grace had a couple of million. So yeah, they basically went for 15 million. It was correct. And yeah, they obviously won. Was it some sort of cake or something, or chips or cookies or something for camp? And then Oti was teaching Dean how to do twerking, so he wasn't really doing it right at the beginning, and then eventually she kind of was teaching him that you just need to, you know, bounce until you hit like the bottle. She was holding her bottle and I think he was bouncing up to the bottle, and she goes, yeah, you're doing it now. And then for dinner they had crocodile tail, and it was Danny and Melvin who decided that they wanted to, you know, have a go at cooking. Again, for the third trial, it was either GK, Barry, or Dean. Again, same two, but this time it wasn't GK, it was Dean. And again, he just said, what's a sarcophagus? With Oti basically replying, it doesn't matter, just kind of do whatever you need to do. So yeah, that's kind of how episode 2 ended, with Dean being able to do the third trial. Again, it's quite difficult to kind of get an understanding of the characters, because obviously it is still so early on and we've still got like a couple of weeks left, but I think Dean is very much a screamer, Grace is very much a screamer, and I think the rest of them are very just like on it, like they know what they're doing, they at least try. I'm not saying the other two don't try, I'm just saying compared to the others, they are the screamers as opposed to the thinkers. And also you've got to think Grace and Dean are probably 2 of the youngest ones that are in there, if not the youngest 2. So maybe they don't really know how to deal with this sort of situation, or, you know, how to face their fears, whereas the other 8 actually maybe have had experiences of dealing with stuff like this before. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, but yeah, I think all 10 of them are really, really good. Like I said, Danny comes along really, really strong. Oti again, very kind of like motherly, very kind of, you know, open and talkative, and, you know, trying to help people out, similar to Jane really. Again, Alan's very talkative. Barry isn't really doing much, he's not really giving much. I think he brings a lot of, you know, interesting stories and, you know, kind of just dipping in and out of different conversations, but he's kind of not really actively doing much other than that first try, which he didn't really do very well in. Again, like I said, Dean's a bit of a screamer, Grace is a bit of a screamer. Talisa, again, comes across very strong. She's kind of like, you know, being that, again, motherly figure, putting herself in charge of the cooking, making sure people are happy, if people are crying, putting her arms around them. Melvin, bit like a comedy guy, so I guess he's trying to bring a bit of entertainment or a bit of laughter, similar to Danny really. And then again, Colleen, I think she just wants to clear the negativeness out of her name, so she wants to just show people who she genuinely is. And, you know, she is getting a lot of good reviews and good, you know, things said about her, whether it's on the news or, you know, in camp, where people don't expect her to be as nice as she is, and she actually is genuine, and she's just really open, and you know, she is married to a footballer, like one of the best UK British footballers or whatever, but she is just a genuine normal person who she didn't want to be famous, she didn't want to be in the news, but because of a situation that she was in, she now has to then clear and defend herself and her name and her family name. So yeah, that's how episode 2 ended. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a review to I'm a Celebrity 2024 episode 3. So at the beginning of this episode, we found out that both Talisa and Alan were going to be choosing campmates to do particular chores, i.e. the camp chores. And after much deliberation, they decided that Melvin and Danny would be the chefs. Jane would be on fire with Dean, especially obviously being able to be in charge of the maintenance. Washing was going to be Colleen and GK. The water was going to be Barry and Oti. And Jane basically said, you know, she obviously is aware that they are sharing their space with animals, saying ignorance is bliss. Basically saying, you know, I'm just going to ignore it, forget about it, and, you know, be at peace, be peaceful, and, you know, hope that, you know, things don't like attack me or eat me throughout the night. Again, they were talking to Dean about his trial, and Oti basically just said, turn your fear into power. GK said that Dean might be a screamer, and Talisa basically told him to use his inner beast. And in this trial, he was basically put in a mummy, so in like an Egyptian kind of pyramid-y thing, head in a box, and he basically had to just answer trivia questions, and had giant mealworms inside a box with him. Obviously what he didn't know is that this tomb, was going to be filled with sand. So a little bit of sand came in absolutely fine. As it started going up to his knees, obviously he wasn't able to move his legs, and once he'd got 2 of the correct answers, and answered some of the questions, he had to say the phrase, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. So we got 2 stars out of the 10, and he basically said, Anton Deck, look, the mealworms weren't really the problem, it was just the fact that the sand was going up and I couldn't feel it. He was actually then told the sand would have gone all the way up to like kind of probably his neck, so he wouldn't have been able to move anything, and then things would have been thrown in there. So yeah, wouldn't have been my cup of tea either. And then we also found out that trial number 4 was going to be announced, called Drowned in the Dumps, and 2 of the campmates were going to be doing that trial. Dean questioned GK about obviously her recent coming out, saying that she's obviously got a girlfriend now called Ella, and Jane kind of said that it kind of seems like GK was using comedy as like a defense mechanism. She also explained that back in the day, you know, there was no social media. People used to have to call in TV shows in order to make complaints rather than, you know, sending in letters and social media and things like that. So yeah, they were kind of discussing GK and her situation, the art of comedy and how important just, you know, that creative world is. And then also back in the day that, you know, that wasn't really around, that wasn't really a thing. Colleen said that she supported Liverpool, Barry supports Tottenham, and they were both having a little chat about their relationships and, you know, the wedding and the situation and however that happened with Colleen. Alan and Dean were talking about their relationships, and obviously Alan talking about his daughter. Dean said he's very happy being single, Alan said he's very happy being a dad, and Talisa said that she feels like that she's demisexual. She needs to be involved with somebody emotionally first before, you know, going forward with anything else. And she said that she's on dating apps and things, but she kind of just seems to have chats with people and then it kind of just drifts off, whether or not because they know that she's famous, or whether or not these people just want a bit of a chat and don't actually end up wanting anything more. She basically said that you can't be everyone's cup of tea, otherwise you'll end up being a mug, which is obviously an interesting phrase. And then GK brought over a letter which read that people's luxury items were actually chosen by their loved ones, and there was a challenge where 2 campmates were able to have the chance to win these luxury items for their campmates. So it was Danny and Alan, and they basically had to answer questions at the Jungle Delivery Centre about each of the 10 contestants or campmates. I think one was about, like when was Colleen married, what was the name of GK's podcast, what did Oti study at university, what was Talisa's N-Dubs band named before it was called N-Dubs, and in the end they ended up getting 8 of the 10 correct, so they won the luxury items for all 8 of Colleen, Alan, Danny, Dean, GK, Oti, Melvin and Talisa, but Jane and Barry didn't win their luxury items. For dessert was buffalo tail and dragon fruit for dessert. And they actually received an Amazon Prime delivery, which had the luxury items. So as follows, GK had a dressing gown from her girlfriend, Talisa had a blow-up chair, Melvin had a pillow with his mum, his dad and Carol Vorderman all over it. Dean had face cream, probably from his mum. Colleen also had a large family pillow with her husband and the three sons. Danny had a Lilo, probably given to him by one of his children. Alan had a golf club. Oti had a Bon Jovi CD, which had 3 plays of a song. And then obviously for the trial, we found out that both Dean and GK would both be facing the trial. So yeah, first trial, Danny and Barry. Second trial, GK. Third trial, Dean. Fourth trial, Dean and GK. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a review of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here 2024, episode 4. So at the beginning of the episode, Jane basically said that obviously they're going to be happy when the sun comes out because they're so used to it being raining and cloudy and not good weather that they're actually going to get excited when they actually have nice weather. GK basically said to Danny that he should disinfect his lucky boxes when obviously he gets home, because obviously from that first trial where he was with the snakes, the snake actually kind of went across his crotch area. So she's basically saying, yeah, she would have got rid of her underwear straight away. Danny, Dean and Oti sang a little song. So they were singing Lovers All Around by Wet Wet Wet. Feeling it in my fingers, I feel it in my bones. And for the trial with GK and Dean, there was 2 hellholes at the top. There was a hole at the top which one of them was going to be standing in to get keys, but they needed to get the keys with gold, not the keys with silver. The keys with silver wouldn't have meant anything. And then the person in the bottom container would be then handed those keys for them to then swim under the water, unlock the locks, the padlocks, and obviously get the stars from each of the padlocks. So kind of similar to the first trial, but obviously underwater as opposed to lying down with snakes. Dean decided he'd go in the top, and GK decided that she would go at the bottom. And yeah, like I said, they just had to pass. Dean had to literally just grab all the keys, pass them down to Grace. Grace would then swim underwater, unlock the lock, and obviously try whichever locks would work for that particular key, and then obviously win those stars. It was a bit of a difficult challenge, and I think Dean was struggling because obviously he had things around him, and he was kind of just finding all the wrong keys, or he was dropping the keys down where she was and she wasn't catching them because they were going onto the floor. And then obviously as he would scream, she would scream, so they weren't kind of working really well together. And that's what Dean basically said. He said, when I scream, she screams. It's a bit of a vicious cycle. And then on deck basically we're like, okay, well don't scream. And he was like, well yeah, it's a lot easier said than done because there's things crawling in here with me. And yeah, I think at one point he was like to Grace, don't look up, because obviously I think he had like some sort of alligator or spider or something in there. And eventually she did manage to like go down to try and put these keys in the locks. It's just every lock she went to, the key just didn't work. So she was trying. It did look quite difficult, especially being in there not on your own. It's like, yeah, if you're not scared of water, fine, but if you're scared of things moving in water like lizards and alligators and the rest of it and eels, you're not really going to want to be confined in that box space. So yeah, they both didn't really do very well there. And at the end of it, GK basically said, you know, I just felt like going for a swim. Like at that point when I just wasn't really doing much, I just wanted to go and, you know, do something. So they didn't get any stars. And Danny basically said that when they came back, it was quite a simple cook for obviously Delvin's diner, because it was kind of just beans and rice, so nothing too much to do. And the 5th trial was called the Lethal Lab. Again, we were introduced to that. We weren't really sure what it was. Some sort of science experiment, some sort of, you know, individual task where they had to kind of go from station to station to station to do some sort of potions, or, you know, be dealt some sort of weird card, and then yeah, have to deal with that. Oti explained that she was a Leo, and Talisa said that her star sign was Cancer. They were talking about Talisa's acting career, and then in 2013 a newspaper set her up, got her in some sort of weird drugs scandal deal, and that she was told that because she's not an actress, she wouldn't get the role that she was going for. She was on a trial and she potentially almost was done for 4 years, but there was a driver who overheard a conversation, and initially he was against Talisa, so he kind of was just lying in court when he knew that there were things dodgy going on involving her, like not her, but they were like forcing her to do certain things or whatever. And then in court, he actually stepped forward in front of Talisa's lawyers, told the correct story, and literally the case was dropped then and there. So very brave taxi driver to speak up and speak out against the people that he was supposedly working with or for or whatever. But I presume something got the better of him and he thought, actually, you know what, I think I should just tell the truth. So he basically just saved her 4 years in prison and also potentially having that court case as well. Melvin obviously said to the contestants in the jungle that he was a little bit too shy to say hello to Cara Vorderman. He's been like crushing over her, or she's been a crush of his for so long. And Talisa decided that she should prepare like a fake kind of role play date for him to ask her on a date. So she was pretending to be Cara Vorderman and he was obviously being himself. So a little bit, at first he was a little bit forward, and then, you know, eventually he got to the point where he was like, would you like to go for dinner here? I've booked a table next weekend, boom, let's go. And she was like, yeah, boom, let's go. So yeah, Cara Vorderman, if you are watching, Melvin fancies you, which I don't think I should be watching this video. And then Danny and Jane were having a conversation, and he basically said that he was actually underage when he had his first tattoos. He has Springsteen letters on him, Let It Be, a tribute to his granddad, a tattoo saying, don't worry, be happy. And he basically said that he braved and was able to actually escape quite a lot from the past. So whether that was family, whether that was trauma, whether that was friendships, whether that was, you know, just situations, like management, music management, you know, ex-housemates, bandmates, whatever. OT added in that, you know, young guys don't talk as much, and she basically said that her brother died at 16, and obviously for her it's still quite difficult for her to live with. So I think this kind of part of the show, they were talking about kind of like, you know, men's mental health, men's physical health, men being able to like speak up about these sorts of situations. And, you know, it is difficult for guys, I think, especially the younger guys, who they feel like they don't really need to talk to anyone, or they don't want to, or they don't feel like people are going to listen. There are so many people out there, men, women, everyone else who will listen to your conversation and who will listen to your situation. I think there's a lot of people that are actively good listeners. They can talk, but they also are able to actively listen as well. And I think I'm one of those. So, you know, if there are people out there that just want to talk or just need to rant, like, I'm happy to listen. But yeah, again, it just depends who sees this video. Melvin was also singing No More Rice and Beans. Danny and Oti were joining in. And Danny basically said that they needed to make dinner creative, with people making their own fritters. Obviously, they had beans and rice, but they had the rice in like little weird shapes, almost kind of like a potato. And then in terms of the trial, again for episode 5, well, for trial number 5, it was either going to be Danny or Dean, and the public had chosen Dean once again. Danny said, I thought I was going to be doing it with you. And yeah, right at the end of the episode, we found out there were going to be 2 new campmates joining the I'm a Celebrity Jungle, but obviously their names weren't mentioned. You kind of just saw little snippets of them. One of them very recognisable. One of them, you kind of know who he is, but I don't really know where he was from. But yeah, we found out that those 2 were going into the jungle. So they would be then from 10 to 12. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's episode, I'm going to be doing a review for the 5th episode of I'm a Celebrity 2024. So, at the beginning of the episode, Dean said that he felt like he was paid to be a morning person, and obviously he is obviously up getting everyone's day started as a radio presenter. So, you know, that's the only reason he enjoys getting up in the morning, because he knows he's getting money for it, which is obviously quite, you know, ironic. He also told some of the campmates that he smuggled tea bags in, so obviously they were able to make hot water. Again, it's one of those things, you've just broadcasted that all over live television, and the producers are not stupid, so they're obviously going to kind of find you for that. But I like the hustle. I like the way that he was able to, you know, force tea bags in to kind of have hot water as opposed to, you know, just plain water, really. And Alan basically just said, oh, it's just a bit of mud in the kettle, like, you know, a wink wink, like, we're not having anything weird, it's just water with a bit of dirt. And then, yeah, Dean obviously went over to his trial, so put the tea bag situation to the side. He obviously went to his zone, and Antoinette basically explained to him that there were 2 stars that he could win in the experimentation area, and there were 8 stars that he could win in the containment areas, with obviously some surprises. He basically said he'd want to try and get at least 1 star, saying that he wanted to try and under-promise and over-deliver, and obviously going through each of the containments. So in the first one, he had to put his tongue in well, actually, yeah, he had to put his tongue to like twirl the star and then use his mouth to like grab the star and move it across the box. He was filled in that box with cockroaches, crickets and mealworms. In the second box he had to move out of the rack a star. So a star was somewhere and he had to just get it from where it was into some box, and he was again covered with lizards. Containment number 3 was again tongue and mouth, and he was obviously joined by some snakes, one of which again sat on his head, but again he managed to not do that. Containment number 4, again moving the star out of the rack, so kind of like spinning it off of the thing. He was joined by spiders. And then in the 5th one, containment number 5, he again had to move the star out of the rack, but he was covered in fish guts. And literally within 2 seconds, he called, "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here." So I think it was just the fact that it was so heavy, wet and squelchy on his neck. You kind of don't really know what it is. Like, it could be, you know, an animal, but it could also just be not nice. He was like, yeah, it's not, it wasn't great. And yeah, I think he basically was just like, oh yeah, you know, the actual animals and insects and stuff. He didn't even realise what he was in the box with. He was kind of looking, being like, is it literally fish guts is the thing that made me like quit the game? Like, I was in the box of spiders and cockroaches and the rest of it, but it was the fish guts that turned him off. And yeah, he basically got 4 out of 10 stars and said, is it bad that I'm okay with that? I guess it's kind of halfway, and he did only kind of anticipate for him to get like 1 or 2. So I don't think that was too bad. And then obviously when he came back, Dean basically said it felt like a bit of a spa day for Dean. So they were like massaging his head, giving him a bubble bath. And again, we found out that the next trial was going to be called the High Street of Horrors. Again, another 2 celebrities were going to be taking part in that. Colleen spoke to OT. Obviously Wayne had struggled with the fame, obviously being a young footballer and, you know, having made mistakes, and the 2 of them, I think, in a couple or relationship or whatever, while they were still at school, is a little bit difficult. And OT said to her that obviously he had to learn how to be resilient at such a young age, especially being a young boy as well. I think Grace joined the conversation here. I think she was just having a conversation with Colleen actually, and Colleen basically said to her that Wayne Rooney likes to write her poetry, with Grace basically saying, well, I wouldn't assume someone like Wayne Rooney, footballer, is going to write someone like his wife poems. I didn't really see that on my bingo. And he said that he's written, and she basically said that he's written cards for her over the years, with notes and poems and, you know, just like nice little phrases and stuff. Again, we properly were introduced to our 2 new campmates. So you had Reverend Richard Coles, who I think is some sort of priest. Don't know who he is, don't know where he's from. He's just some priest from somewhere. And then obviously Maura Higgins from Love Island 2000, and the same year as Molly May and Tommy. But yeah, I recognised Maura, her voice, straight away, and I was, as soon as I found out she was announced for the show, I almost wet my pants. I was so excited. But yeah, I think for me, my front runners, I think, are Talisa, Maura and GK. GK is a bit of a screamer, but I think Talisa and Maura are still quite strong, and I think, you know, with that little powerful group of girls in there, they should be able to get quite far. But obviously, let's see what happens. But yeah, Maura and Richard entered the junkyard, which, just by the sound of junkyard, sounds awful. It actually ended up being even more luxurious than main camp. Maura basically said that she liked Richard, but she swears a lot. So obviously, having, you know, being near a priest, she's like, God this, and goodness that, and Jesus Christ this. And obviously she's like, I'm really sorry, priest. I'm really sorry, Father. And yeah, they basically found that they ended up having a double bed. They had a sofa, they had bubble baths, they had fruit juices, they had snacks, they had a fire that was kind of already set for them. Not to worry about any of the food, there was always just food. And they were basically on a secret mission to win food for the junkyard buffet, which would obviously include all of the campmates. But in order to do that, they had to go against the campmates and do things that would be a bit mischievous and a bit weird without being caught out, because obviously if they were caught out, that would mean no one wins anything. So yeah, their mission was to win food for the junkyard buffet, and they basically had to make out to the other campmates that they were on rations with no bed, no nothing, no fire, and that would obviously bring them some easy meals for their first little task. Maura said that she's a good liar, and Richard added that he's a fast learner and he thinks he's going to learn fast while being in there with Maura. Maura basically said she felt like she was in a 7-star camp, and they basically had to convince, as their next task, one of the campmates to give up their bed in order for them to win another 3 meals for the junkyard. And as the new campmates, they have to obviously do the cleaning. And there was a letter sent to main camp that obviously the 2 new campmates that were obviously at the junkyard had to earn their place in the main camp by obviously doing their chores. Grace and Colleen went down to quickly go and say hello to the 2 of them, and Grace basically said, oh no, it's not the face of thunder, as obviously looking at Maura, because obviously that's kind of probably what she was used to be described as. Colleen also went down there as well, and obviously they were basically said how bad it was living down there, and you know, they had to do the washing up, and they had nothing, no fire, no water, no nothing. And yeah, Richard and Maura then had to do a task with Melvin, and again they basically said, they were basically sitting on these little podium chairs, and they basically said to Melvin that they were doing a mission in order to, you know, win treats for camp, so they needed to just, yeah, they needed to win as many stars as possible. So they were sitting at the top, and every few minutes they were being given sandwiches with cheese and fruit and all sorts. And what Melvin had to do is get offal from a bucket that was falling on him, slide it down some slide, and then kind of fill up some tub to a level. So what he didn't know is that they were throwing the offal on him, and they were just sitting there eating their sandwiches and eating their fruit and drinking whatever. And obviously, yeah, it was just coming just down as plop. So they weren't even being covered with it. They just kind of being covered with, you know, free food. So yeah, they basically had to pretend that they were actually involved in this trial to not make it look obvious that they weren't. So Maura just basically said, yeah, scream, cry if you have to. Yeah, they were drinking tea, eating sandwiches. And at the end of it, Maura basically was just like, I'm crying, I can't help it. With Richard basically saying, it's not like it's tea and sandwiches, it's not like, you know, we're just having a lovely day out. He was basically making it kind of quite obvious that that's what they were doing, but obviously to Melvin, in that mode, you're like, oh, well, it's not tea and sandwiches, is it? No, it's awful. So, yeah. And, yeah, so obviously Melvin did manage to win that task, which I think won them 10 little cakes. But when Melvin came out of the task, only 5 cakes were there, and he had a little note on the cake box saying, there is contraband in camp, therefore you've lost half of the cakes. And Barry said, all right, well, it's the tea bags, right? So Dean basically said, oh no, the tea bags fell into my backpack, and I happened to just make everyone a cup of tea. And then obviously Talisa also went to the kind of like diary room of I'm a Celebrity, and she basically said that Melvin had given her some seasonings on the first day to kind of make the food a little bit less bland. So both Dean and Talisa owned up to the tea bags and the seasonings, and they managed to obviously dispose of those. Richard and Maura also then wrote a begging letter for the main camp in order for, again, one of them to be given a bed. And Jane said that they all keep thinking about the 2 new campmates, and they'd be happy for one of them to get the bed, and she'd happily use the mattress. And then Dean said to Jane he's happy to give his bed to her, just because obviously he didn't feel like she needed to sleep on the floor. And Maura basically explained that she didn't need to look too happy, she didn't want to look too happy, because almost, you know, that kind of give away the fact that they're actually having so much fun. And Richard explained that he didn't realise that being evil would actually be so fun. Dinner for the main camp was wild boar fillet with vegetables, and Talisa basically explained that she was just watching them do the hard work, but she was kind of just telling and guiding them in terms of what they needed to do. Richard and Maura also had wild boar fillet and vegetables. Maura did the prep, Richard did the cooking, and she said that she never saw the day that she'd sleep with the vicar. Her friends wouldn't be too shocked by that. And in terms of the trial, either Dean or Danny, we found out that both of them were going to be doing the trial, and we found out that Richard and Maura would also be on the trial. Didn't really get much more information than that, but we found out that both Richard and Maura would also be on the trial, but in which way, not really 100% sure. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing a review for I'm a Celebrity 2024 episode 6. So this was Friday's episode. At the beginning of the episode, GK basically said if they have to stay down there at the junkyard another night, Maura's definitely walking. Kind of her thinking that Maura's not able to survive in that unluxurious place down there. Dean explained that his back is sore, but he didn't want Jane sleeping on the floor. He'd rather her have a bed and him, you know, sacrifice himself to be on the floor. And Danny basically said that they deserve to have a little bit of a lift in camp, something to kind of bring the mood up a little bit. Richard and Maura received a note that they were to make their way to the trial, with Maura saying, look, if I'm going to be having to be involved in this, I'm literally not in the mood today. Anton Deck basically explained to them that they had to make out that they've just done a trial called Deadly Department Store, and that they failed the trial, and they had to come up with some weird backstory, cover themselves in tar and feathers and kind of make it look believable that they just failed a task. Maura said, look miserable, I'm starving, was basically what she said. And Richard basically said that he didn't expect to have a trial with birds, with Maura saying that the worst part was the snake. So I think at this point Danny and Dean had already come into the situation. They basically looked at Maura and Richard like, well, hello, but also what the hell has happened? So yeah, they basically said, yeah, we didn't win any stars, and they didn't seem too disappointed. But at the same time, they obviously had their own trial to face as well. So yeah, for Dean and Danny, they had to face their trial, which was obviously the Deadly Shop or whatever it was called. And they basically had 3 little shops to go into, 3 stars to win in the first 2 and 4 stars to win in the last. So up first was the Grim Grocers. So there was literally boxes with just vegetables and meats and fish guts and the rest of it. And they had to try and find 3 stars in 3 minutes. But Danny managed to find 2. And Dean was trying to look through the fish guts. He just wasn't able to get his hands in deep enough. They weren't able to find the last star, and Anton Deck told them that the last star was actually in fact in the fish guts. So he was kind of in the right place, just wasn't able to, you know, search far and deep enough. The second shop was called Electrifying Electrical Store. So this was basically just covered with just shocks and beetles. Again, there was 3 stars up for grabs here, and I think Danny had to go kind of like under a sink or into like some sort of weird cabin thing to get a star, and he was having little like electric shocks on him the whole time, and Dean was like, no, I'm not doing that. And then yeah, I think he had to then jump in a box and kind of, you know, get something out of a box. So yeah, in the end there was 2 stars won in that one as well. And then the final one was called Sinister Self Storage, which was covered with pigeons, lizards and frogs. Again, I think Danny he ended up going in some crate thing to grab a star, and then Dean had to go in a different crate to grab a different star, but he actually managed to get in, and they managed to get all 4 of those stars within the 4 minutes. So 8 out of 10, decent enough meal. And then Anton Deck revealed that one of the 2 of them had to move to the junkyard to obviously live that life of unluxuriousness. And it was Richard and Maura that had to decide. They chose Dean. Maura said that he probably would love the luxury, and they basically they'll show him around. As he was walking on his way out, Dean looked at Anton Deck and whispered, kind of like mouthed, like, what have I done? Like, what am I doing? I've literally, I'm not going back to main camp. I'm going to this really weird camp that just doesn't have anything. Alan and some of the other campmates were talking about their favourite meals. So he was saying that he likes eggs Florentine, Colleen likes scrambled eggs, and both Jane and GK wondered where Dean was. GK said that she felt a little bit distraught without Dean. It's almost like they were a married couple, but obviously now that he's not there, she's kind of on her own. Maura said to Dean that obviously the only decent thing that they had was a red button, and obviously as soon as she pressed the red button, all of the luxurious things came out, and Dean basically was just like, you've got to be kidding me. And Maura said that we've not been in hell, we've been in luxury. Richard explained about the red button. Obviously when the campmates from the main camp were coming down, they had to just, you know, put everything away and look as unsuspicious as possible. And Dean said that he went to drama school and he knew it would come in handy one day. Colleen was talking to Barry about a little boxing ring she'd bought for the kids. Her dad used to be an amateur boxer, and Dean basically said to Maura that she kind of is coming across a little bit suspicious because obviously he can smell her hair and it just smells a little bit too nice. So she just had a bubble bath, so she needs to just make herself a little bit dirty, otherwise it will become suspicious. And yeah, she basically was just like, if Wagatha Christie comes down, she's definitely going to suss Dean out as well. And it was up to Oti and Jane, who were off to visit the junkyard next. Richard basically said to Jane, look, I'm sorry we're taking your Dean away from you. And Maura said, you know, imagine when we get to the other camp, I'm going to lose my bed and I'm going to lose my bubble bath. Obviously that's when they said goodbye to Jane and Oti. And for dinner, both camps had bony fish, and the main camp had the opportunity to share with the campmates in the junkyard. So you've got to think about it. Those in the junkyard Maura, Richard and Dean did not need extra food. They basically had food every night anyway, but if main camp were to give them a little bit of extra food, that's more meals for their junkyard buffet. Talisa said, yeah, let's give them enough for 3. And obviously, yeah, if the main camp were to give them food, they'd win more meals. Colleen and Danny went down to go and collect the dishes and obviously take down the spare food for them. And Colleen came back to the main camp and said, look, I got this look off of them and I don't feel like they're telling us the truth. Apparently Dean had the same face that Maura had yesterday, and then they're hiding something from them. Danny also said that on that trial the feathers looked fake and they smell a little bit too nice. And Melvin said that there were too many fish guts being thrown on him in the task rather than them falling on all of them, so he kind of felt like, you know, there's something a little bit suspicious here. And Talisa said they need to ask a couple of questions for them, with Melvin saying if they want another bed, we say no. Almost kind of putting his foot down, being like, look, they've already tried it once with the extra food, the cleaning, the we don't have anything on our camp, so anything else they ask for, we're not going to give it to them. We just want to see if they can survive without it. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Is That More Brandon. So in today's episode, I'm going to be doing a review for I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here episode 7 for 2024. This was Saturday's episode, and we found out that at the beginning of the episode, Danny and Oti were cheering for coconuts, because obviously they were able to make things like coconut rice and coconut tea, rather than just it being water or beans and rice. Dean explained he had the best night's sleep of his life. Melvin and Colleen were both unsure about the junkyard celebrities, with Melvin adding that everything that they've seen of the celebrities has been a bit of a facade. Jane explained that she had to take Dean his toiletries, with Alan questioning, well, what has he been doing for toiletries in the meantime? And we found out that all 9 of the main campmates would be taking part in the next trial, with Talisa saying to Colleen, get those questions ready. Maura said to both Dean and Reverend Richard that hopefully they won't have to do anything for this trial, with Dean saying that he's done more than enough trials so far. And Jane basically said to the rest of the campmates, don't say anything to them about that we've rumbled them, don't let them know that we have. And the next trial was called the Teddy Bear Picnic. So this is where all 12 of them are actually together for the first time. They let Dean go over to his campmates, so he just kind of went over there, and it was Maura and Reverend Richard who were kind of sitting in front of Anne's deck. And yeah, just before obviously they let Dean go over, they were kind of just, Colleen was basically just saying, look, it didn't really seem like you actually were living in anything bad. And Dean was like, did you really just work it out? Melvin was like, well, hang on, you've literally just revealed that there was something that we needed to work out. And Richard just said, Maura made me do it. So, you know, putting the blame on her. But yeah, for the terrifying teddy bear picnic, eventually Richard and Maura did confess and did basically say that they were living the life of luxury. They had food every night, and they, you know, had bubble baths and the rest of it, and obviously just a double bed and things. But they did say it was for a good cause, and it was to win food for their banquet. So, you know, although the campmates were a little bit upset that they were being lied to, at the same time it actually benefited them more because they got more food. For the trial, both Maura and Richard had 6 rounds of food to eat. I think the first 4 rounds were their individual items, and then round 5 and 6 was just a sharing platter where they both had to just share a bit of whatever was on the plate. So it wasn't normal food, obviously. So for round 1, Maura had to eat 2 pig eyeballs, Richard had to eat 5 cockroaches, 5 crickets. Round 2, it was up for Richard to take a blended fermented herring drink, with Maura having a blended beachworm drink. Round 3, Maura had to eat 2 scorpions, Richard had to eat a pig snout, which he literally did in 1. Round 4, Richard had to eat a crocodile anus, and Maura had to do a goat testicle, which she had to split into 2 and do half and half, because obviously a bit thick, and yeah, she wasn't able to put that entire thing in her mouth. And then rounds 5 and 6, for round 5, they had to both share a worm sandwich and a cow's teat, and for round 6 they had to share a vomit fruit, sheep brain, mealworms, a bull's penis and a snail. So kind of like a bit of everything on that little buffet there. They managed to win all 12 of the stars, so an extra 12 portions of food for camp. And Colleen explained that the eating challenge was tough. Both Richard and Maura have redeemed themselves, but I'm not too sure about Dean, because obviously he kind of betrayed the main camp to kind of go and live this life of luxury for a few days. So she's not sure how he can make it up for them. And the next trial was called Absolute Carnage, but again, another 2 people were taking part in that challenge. Dean and Maura were talking about beds, and obviously I think she was basically saying, well, why can't I just go in one of these 2 beds? And obviously that's when he said that's where the leaders go. She just kind of went, honey, I'm home, because obviously she's back at camp, back at main camp. So yeah, she's hoping to get one of those beds. Oti and Richard were having a chat with each other, and she basically said to him that if he wasn't feeling very good at sleeping on the hammock, she was absolutely happy to switch with him, so for him to have a bed and her to have a hammock. And Dean ended up having a little sleep on Danny's bed. He ended up having a deep sleep nap. It was buffet time, and there was loads of food that was brought down. So there was chicken nuggets, kangaroo burgers, pizza, hot dogs, onion rings, and GK literally was just like, oh my god, it's a chicken nugget. And then Melvin just said, you don't realise what you've done for us today, looking at Richard being like, you know, thank you very much, like you've blessed us with all this lovely real food. It was then time for Jane and Dean to go and collect some wood for the fire, so I think they'd already had this food at this point. So Jane's gone straight down, and I think one of the rules were you're not allowed to collect wood by yourself, so obviously Dean and Jane were on wood duty. I think Alan tried to wake Dean up, he didn't, and I think he was just kind of like, oh okay, never mind then, you obviously don't want to get involved. He then woke up, had to sort his lenses out because he was obviously wearing contact lenses. I don't know why you sleep in lenses, you shouldn't do that, but he was anyway. And then he obviously went down to go and help Jane, and Alan was like, oh, finally, you're up. And he basically, I wouldn't say he had a go at Alan, but he basically was just said to Alan, look, I don't know what just happened back there, but I literally, you asked me a question, I hadn't even woken up, it takes me a few minutes to wake up, and then I would have actually answered your question, but you didn't even give me time to answer. You asked me a question and just basically just said, no, you're not doing it, or no, you don't want to help. So yeah, he was kind of having a little bit of a go at him. I think they just need to have some sort of drama in there. So yeah, Dean's obviously the first one to start that. Yeah, he obviously kind of just said to, Alan just said to Dean, oh, okay, fine, you don't fancy it, as if like he knew that Dean was listening, but knew he was lazy or whatever. Eventually Dean helped, eventually Dean took over, and he just put Alan in his place. Alan kind of just stepped back and was like, I don't really want drama, like just, yeah, that's fine, like I'm not trying to start anything negative with you. So yeah, they kind of had a little bit of a disagreement there. Again, Jane was very quiet, she said thank you to Alan, and again she didn't really thank Dean much, she kind of just walked straight past him. So there's some sort of, yeah, weird chemistry now going on between the 3 of them, which is a bit strange. But yeah, Jane didn't really need to get involved and, you know, be rude to him. She could have just said, you know, complete misunderstanding. Alan did what he needed to do. You're now actually helping me, which is fine. But she kind of just didn't say anything. So that was a little bit weird. And then obviously in terms of the trial, we found out that either Colleen or Dean were going to be doing Absolute Carnage. We then found out it was going to be the both of them. So both of them were taking part. Dean basically said it's going to be a lot of fun, and it was up to the public to then vote for their new camp leaders. So that is the end of episode 7. So if you did enjoy my review, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. If you did enjoy my first weekly review, don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe. And until my second week and weekly episode reviews, I will be back with some new videos very, very soon. And until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.